Park Commission to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Manns, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 2 is roll call. Mr. Moran is here. Mr. Rathel is excused. Mr. Van Oz is excused. Mr. Tenova?
Here.
Mr. Manns?
Here.
Mr. Folbaum? Here. Mr. Filarski? Item number 3 is any additions or deletions to the agenda? Anyone have any additions or deletions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted. Motion by Mr. Folbaum.
Support.
Support by Mr. Manns. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 4 we had prior to the meeting, so we'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 18, 2017.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Folbaum.
Support.
Support by Mr. Tenova. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 6 is the financial report for January 2017. And I'm assuming that's supposed to be 18.
Correct.
Everyone should have the financial report in front of them, and it, in summary, it reads as our revenue was budgeted at $795,718, with our year-to-date revenue at $693,619, which equals 87% of our budget. Our expenditures are budgeted at $795,718. And our year-to-date encumbrances and expenses is $677,578, and that equals just under 84% of our budget. We have capital reserves as of January 31st, 2018 of $643,713. And we have a past due summary as of February 7th, 2018 of $5,542. And legal pending action is equals $10,118. With that, Mike, is there anything you want to point out in the budget?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can see, if you recall from previous meetings, we've been waiting for a reimbursement from MDOT Aeronautics on our runway emergency repair fund that we did. They give us a grant for that, but because it's kind of an undetermined amount at the beginning of the year, we front, the airport fronts the cash for those repairs, and then we get reimbursed once the contract closes out. We finally closed that, and I've been waiting for the direct deposit to come through for that, and it turned out it got put into a different account inside the township, so it took us a couple of weeks to find it there, but we did finally receive it. It's approximately $50,000. You can see there $46,000. That's highlighted in green too, and it gets put against the expenditures on the airport, so that's why you see a credit there. Finally showing us in balance and tracking along pretty nicely for the budget there for our fiscal year. You can see the fuel inventory there. We got 2 loads in at the exact same time, so our values are similar. Jet A is around $13,000. Avgas 100 low leads around $17,000. Past due rent summary. Couple of familiar names in there, a couple of new ones. The Tomasic, I finally got onto a payment plan of $500 a month. The first payment's been made. Guckin should be in this week to get caught up there. We discussed that on the phone. And the Vesquez compound is our boatyard. Having some dispute there with the tenant, but they are on a payment plan and have made the first payment. So working through that, trying to get that down before the end of our fiscal year there.
Any questions for Mike on the budget and the financial report? Questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file. Motion by Mr. Folbaum.
Support.
Support by Mr. Manns to receive and file the financial report for January 2018. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 7 is the manager's report. The first item, 7A, is the budget review and our capital improvement list.
thing here.
Mike, is what you passed out different tonight than what you had in the
No, that's what I was going to give for that.
same thing? Okay.
So that's our capital improvement, proposed capital improvement plan there. Sorry. All right, this is our budget presentation for our fiscal 18-19 year. Can you guys see that up on your screen there?
Daryl does it. His isn't working, but if you
That's
want
okay,
to
I
pay
can-
attention to the, okay.
Just a quick overview. This budget anticipates revenue from Building 63 operated as a storage facility. If you recall, we restructured that last year. It still operates as a storage facility, but under a different management group. It anticipates us operating an FBO in our Hangar 2 facility for the fiscal year. We have 2 employees there. Just a reminder on that. We basically traded at the time. We made it pretty much a wash. We had an FBO in place. They went out of business. We were paying them a flowage fee for gas that they pumped, and then we were also paying a cleaning company to maintain the facility for us there. When that company went out of business, we retained the 2 employees that were present. We didn't have to pay the flowage fee any longer, and the employees were cleaning the facility. So it was plus or minus $1,000 on the deal. I mean, it basically gives us a basic service at the airport for incoming and outgoing tenants. I wouldn't say it's top of the line. It's not the best setup, but it gets us by and gets transient traffic what they need coming and going. Setting up rental cars, courtesy car, if they're doing food or anything like that, we assist. It anticipates no rental increases for hangars, T-hangars. Most of our rental rates increased annually based on the Metro Detroit Consumer Price CPI Index. Some are scheduled increases, but I'd say about 80% of ours are based on CPI. And this year, the CPI increase was 2.13% for the Metro Detroit area. Expenses, when I'm doing this, a fair amount of the employee cost data comes from our finance department. I look over that, plug it into the budget, and then everything else, I look at previous year's trends, normally going between 3 and 4 years out, looking at expenses and all the trends there. Again, all the employee costs are provided by finance and accounting. Here's our summary here. And again, this is with all of our proposed capital improvements plugged into the budget. So you can see a total balanced budget of $962,617, or roughly a 22% increase from last year to meet those projects. And feel free to stop me at any point along the way for questions or review of anything else. And there's a breakdown of what blue is revenue and yellow is expenses of what this year's proposed budget looks like. Fuel farm expenses, again, most of these are plugged in from the accounting department. We do apply salaries and a portion of the insurance costs, employee costs to the fuel farm as a cost center. Minimal increases there or decreases. And the fuel farm overall is really a cash in, cash out. I'll show you the graph here in a minute. I mean, if we sell more fuel than we anticipated, we purchase more fuel than we anticipated. So it's kind of always a moving target there. We've budgeted $164,000 as a rough number really for the last 3 or 4 years. This year, right now, is one of probably the best year we've had since I've been here. And we're hovering around $165,000 of revenue to date, and we still have a couple months to go. So that's a pretty good sign. But again, 164 we're normally a little under that, but that's what we budget for in revenues, and the expenses are normally right around there too.
Mr. Mans.
Mike, real quick, can you remind me how you calculate the fuel cost? Is that a rolling average, or is it what you bring in the current cost?
So it's a blended average of the fuel that's left in the tank at the previous cost, blended with the new price. And I have we've created an Excel spreadsheet that breaks down, it blends the two costs together based on how many gallons are left. We manually dip the tank with a stick to see how many inches are left in it. And then I look at and compare it to the fuel sales we've done since we got the load in to make sure the totals are lining up. And then in that price, we also include all of our taxes, your federal excise tax, your spill tax, all of that gets blended into that cost as well. So just the cost is what the cost is. We don't up or lower it based on market or anything like that. What we pay is a blended cost and what you pay at the pump. So we have a fixed price per gallon that we charge for operating and maintenance. And you can see on this expense line item there, we have a standard maintenance budget on the fuel farm of $5,000. That covers our annual checkups, our filters. Normally we have 1 or 2 pieces of electrical equipment, a pump or something that goes out along the lines, just standard maintenance on the system. And then the secondary containment wall repair. Again, it was estimated to be about half that by a contractor, but the engineer felt we needed to increase it. So that's where you're seeing that number come from. And as we discussed earlier with Mr. Flarski, the sales tax is kind of a cash in, cash out, so we quit budgeting that line item. It's collected as we go and then paid to the state. And again, so what you're seeing there is we're going back to fiscal year 14-15, just so you can kind of see the trends. 17-18, that number is year to date. So that was taken as of, I believe that actually was pulled as of about 15 to 20 days ago. So we still have another month or two to go in the fiscal year. And then the 17-18 is what we're proposing to be for a budget. So you can see this year, I mean, 14-15, we're 143,000. This year we're at 165. So, I mean, not a drastic increase, but it's an increase. We're seeing more traffic and more flow. That's good. Pilots are flying a little bit more. Commerce Park revenues, everything here is the same with the exception of TSC construction. They're really the only loss there. You'll see them in building 61, 62. They occupied approximately 10,000 of the 70,000 square feet in that building. It wasn't, I mean, it was a nice revenue to have, but by no means occupied the entire facility. They were done as of, I think I reported that to the commission 2 months ago, would be their last month. Everything else there is the same in terms of increases. I mean, you're looking at the rent income at 0.72% is some are CPI, some are scheduled increases, some are neutral. Depends on how we negotiated the deal, but all fairly standard increases and minimal. And then obviously prior year resources is where you can see that 97,000 where we're pulling from our capital reserves to meet the demand for these improvement projects that we're looking at. I split that evenly between the Commerce Park and the airport, and it's all the same capital reserve account, but it goes into different line items. More Commerce Park expenses. Again, this is plugged in mostly from the finance department. You see salaries and overtime's down a little bit. That's just based on previous year actuals. This year will probably go back up and we'll budget a little higher next year just with the amount of snowfall we've had. Maintenance and repairs, 7,500. That's all unchanged. Most of these items are the same, and then obviously when we get down to maintenance buildings, you can see our Building 75 roof replacement in there. And the tennis center, if we elect to do that, another section of that roof, that cost is in there as well. You will see, because this budget year is tighter, right now I'm showing no beautification match. I'm going to look and see if there's grants available in there or anything like that. I don't know if we want to add something back in, we can, but with the capital improvement projects to minimize the impact on the capital reserves, I deleted that for the year.
Mike, on going back to the revenue, is there any indication of any issues with any of these tenants? Do we have to worry about any of them?
The only one that I'm having an issue with, and you guys are familiar with, is the Vesquez, that boatyard we're trying to get cleaned up right now. But once the tenant's done, I'm more worried about getting payment on the facility, but once the tenant's fully out of there, I mean, I've had at least 2 requests so far for that yard. So I think the revenue is going to be there. I don't see any issues with any of the other tenants. I mean, they're all, I would say 90% of the tenants on that list are long-term, long-remaining tenants. They've been here for over 5 years at least. Some have been 20.
Mike, do we have any good prospects for any of the other open areas?
Our real only open area right now is 61, 62. I do not. We've had, I get interest now and again from people that need 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 square feet and are looking at subdividing. we'll tinker around with that, but that building's a difficult facility to look and subdivide. I mean, we can look at that again with the architect if we like, but normally the costs are pretty substantial to doing something like that. You know, in the past, we've gone through brokers and haven't had a whole lot of luck. You know, I think, and I've told the commission this before, I think our market really is local businessmen, either downriver or on Grosse Ile, that are looking maybe to keep the business a little closer to home, that have a light industrial, manufacturing, whatever type of business. But it's easier to keep an eye on. It's a quiet town. They're looking for a little bit of a quiet setting. But no, I don't have any other prospects on that. Other than that, I mean, other than our large facility, Building 61, 62, our units are full in the Commerce Park. And I've been tinkering with looking at potentially building a new site and talking to some contractors here on the island. That's in my management report later. I can cover, show you a brief sketch that I've been looking at. Any other questions on Commerce Park expenses? We're good to move on? Okay.
One more thing, but
Yes, sir.
I think maybe we should look at a bad debt expense for next year. I think 140 is a little low.
Okay.
I know I kind of brought that up in the past, but if Am's coming up with that number and that's where it's gonna be, then
I can increase that. I mean, I can override that. That's no problem.
I don't know. Ron, do you have any?
What's a run on a normal year?
I'd have to pull the data for you. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can find that out for our next meeting.
Why don't we have him
Yeah, have
pull
him
that, and whatever that average is, we'll plug that number in.
Okay. There's a graph looking at from 14, 15, 16, 16, 17, your current. Obviously, that's not a great looking graph to me. I mean, it's a downward trend on our revenue side. I did go back and pull further years, and I'll show that to you here. You can see this, obviously, after the crash, 2009 and 10 were our worst years. I mean, we were only pulling $169,000 of revenue out of our Commerce Park. That's a pretty scary number. When I came on board, we were lucky enough to find a tenant pretty quick in 2012, 13 when things picked back up. You see that spike to $366,000. We had 13, 14, which was kind of a blended year where we lost a tenant and found, we had a partial year where the tenant was there, you know, roughly 4 or 5 months, went out of business, left. And then 14, 15, 15, 16, I had found vehicle development was our tenant in that facility, manufacturing. And then again, 16, 17 was kind of the blended year where they were in for part of the year and moved out. So we obviously see this violent swing with having a major tenant in one of our vacant facilities there. I mean, obviously that's very helpful for our budget if we can do that. Obviously the revenues are a little bit higher. We're showing this year budgeted at 18, 19 because we're supplementing that with our capital reserves for these projects. Airfield revenues, you know, obviously a little bit more happy things to report there. Our T hangars are full currently. Every single one has been rented out. I increase, again, I'm conservative. Normally we have at least 2 or 3 coming and going. So I budgeted the T hangars at all but 3 occupancy. So I budgeted for 3 vacancies there. Hangar number 1 has approximately 12 or 13 planes in it, around 152 a month. So you're seeing that $14,500 number. And our hangar number 2 is currently rented out by a client who has their private plane in there now. So we're getting a steady revenue stream from that. Rent increase from hangar number 2. Let's see there. It's pretty much all the same. We got 1 new office lease. Pictures of Motion's been there for an extended period. Miscellaneous income is kind of the one wild card. I've got a couple weddings on the books for this summer and several photo shoots already for this year. So, I mean, we average, I think my best year was almost $30,000 on that account in revenue. We've been averaging probably a little over 20, but I budget low. I don't know what, I mean, I could get 0 photo shoots and 2 weddings and make $4,000. So 8,000 is kind of, 6,000 is kind of a good conservative number in there. And the rest can be a little extra cushion, if you will.
Mike, what kind of photo shoots?
Mostly automotive.
Bill?
Yep.
That's-
We just did one at Christmas time with Jeep. They did their new SRT Grand Cherokee, and they had Santa come in and drive out of the hangar like a sleigh kind of a setup, and they had a whole crew there. You could look it up online if you would like to see the video. I could probably provide it. But I would say 90% of our shoots are automotive. We did one with automotive, but it was interview only, where they set up a scene and a table with the doors in the background and just do a wide angle lens interview, things like that. But most of it's vehicles. Going on to expenses, not much change here. Again, plugged in from the accounting department. The gas and oil line there you see for $13,000, the 740-000. That is for our maintenance shop. That's our tractors, our trucks that we daily drive, the farm diesel that we have. So we break that out obviously into a separate account. I plugged 8,500 in for the admin expense. We discussed that. I haven't firmed that number up yet. Hopefully I'll discuss that a little more in my meetings this week. Everything else on that page is pretty much the same, unchanged. Which, the admin? See here, standard maintenance runways 8,000. We'll use that to match that grant I discussed earlier. The $50,000, we're responsible for 10% of that. So we need to come up with $5,000 there, and any other miscellaneous pavement repairs. GCO is a radio system that we use in my office that pilots use to call out to Metro, and that's a pretty minimal line item. And then obviously you see normal maintenance there for our T-hangers, $5,500. That's chains, motors, cables, standard maintenance items, and then the coating system on the hangar C row of the roofs there that are heavily corroded and rusting. And also at the bottom, you'll see the equipment purchase for our F-250 that we were proposed. I think we'll work that number down with the employee being happy with an F-150. I think that would probably be in the upper 20s, low $30,000 range out the door. You can see there in bold on that page, it's the last payment due for our municipal bond. You're looking at $80,000 there. Obviously, the principal payment goes up, our interest payment goes down. But you're looking overall at roughly, $85,000 bond payment. That's a large chunk of our budget that's going to be relieved. We do potentially have some payments coming up for our runway project, again, that hasn't been invoiced yet from MDOT Aeronautics. We took the loan from the township on that. It would be a lower payment, but it'd still be extended out over several years.
And roughly what is that payment?
I think we extended over 5 years, so it'd be roughly $60,000 a year. Yep, $300,000 total.
So it's with this
$20,000.
coming off and that one coming on, there's about a $20,000 swing.
Correct.
Mike, how long was that?
Bond payment?
That bond payment I could look up for you. 2004 to 2018. Yep, and it's a graduating system. So in 2005 the payment was $63,000. This year it's $82,520. So obviously that's been tied around our ankles a little bit, dragging us down. Should free up a little bit of cash there, and it'll be nice to have that paid off. That was for Fuel Farm. When we did a large install on the system, we rolled that into this new bond. We refinanced that, and some extensive repairs and upgrades to Hangar 2. Here's the airfield revenues and expenses summary going back 14-15. So tracking all right. Again, 17-18, it looks low, but that's year to date. So it actually should be on par with last year. So overall, the airport's gone up since 14-15. Expenses are pretty consistent. That concludes my presentation on that. Any final questions or anything?
Questions, comments for Mike on the budget?
My note, I'll look up, Mr. Chair, I'll look up the bad debt expense and see what we've been averaging and report back.
Okay. If there's no more questions on the budget presentation, we'll move on to item number 7B, which is a potential new Commerce Park building. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be a little briefer than I wanted. I was hoping to have a little more information to you from a contractor today, but I do not have that. I've mentioned to some, and I'm trying to remember if I mentioned it at the last meeting, but I'm starting to look at, I've had continued interest from several parties here on the island and off island for commercial space, somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000. The trend I saw over last summer was people looking for a T-hanger like setup, but they also wanted a little bit of storage space. So one idea I've been tinkering with is building a single building divvied into 4, 5, however many units we see. I think 4 is a good number to start with, and have a yard surrounding that facility. 2,000 square feet, I'm talking, I mean, I have 2 landscaping contractors and a third excavating company that's looking for storage space. 2,000 square feet seems to be a good size unit for them. They want a taller door, like a 14-foot overhead door, something along those lines. And then roughly 20,000, between 10 and 20,000 square feet of outdoor storage space. So somebody put a fence up around and that. So I'm trying just, right now it's very preliminary, talking to potential clients. And then I'm trying to get a price and see what an 8,000 square foot steel building would cost. The tenant who does excavating can also do foundation work. So obviously, I can get an estimate there on what it would take to put in utilities and things like that in a concrete pad for this building, and see if, I'll start playing with some rental numbers there and see if we can make sense of it, if it makes sense. And the tenants, if we can charge a rate the tenants are willing to pay, I think it'd be a no-brainer to go for a facility like this. We've had a lot of requests over the last 2 or 3 years for smaller facilities, and I noted earlier, everything in our Commerce Park is currently full that's under 5,000 square feet. So I was hoping to have an estimate on the building a little more data today. I don't have that. I've been waiting for a contractor to give me some kind of drawings and specs on that. So hopefully next meeting I'll have a little more to report back to you. But just wanted to make the commission aware that's something that it's been stewing.
Mike, what's the soil conditions on that site?
It doesn't have to be at that site in particular. I mean, there definitely would be some cleanup. We might be able to tap into our brownfield on. I mean, we have several fields we could utilize for that. We do have one piece of virgin property off of Meridian there that's a potential. It kind of would have to depend on what site. I just picked that one next to Island Stowaway as an example. That site in particular, I believe, still has a foundation under it. So we'd probably have to excavate and do some work there. Most of these sites have some steam tunnels running through the property. So, I mean, there's an environmental aspect there that definitely has to be considered. There's also unknowns when you go into something like that. But again, we do have some undeveloped land by the Navy that we could potentially do also. So just very preliminary, but something I'm working towards I think would be a nice addition to our Commerce Park. Just need to see, I'm trying to get some of the cost estimates in and see if what we would have to charge for rent makes sense to the clients before we waste too much time investing in it.
So you'll bring this back maybe next meeting?
Correct.
Any questions for Mike on the potential new building? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7C, which is runway 0422 contract update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just another brief update on this. The contract still isn't closed out. With the ground thawing, I'm hoping we can get the contractor down here. There's a minimal punch list, items left over. Needs to fill in some holes that utility poles were sunk in. They need to do a little bit of grading work around one of our instrumentation systems off the side of the runway. Our reels, they're called. It's a strobe light that flashes for guidance. A couple other fabric separation removal, some very minor punch items. The contractor's been busy on Zero Where. There's a lot of construction going on. They're a large contractor, so they've been pretty busy on other projects. But I'm the engineer and I have been nudging them to try to come down and finish the project up. We do have a continued issue on an FAA flight check on our PAPIs. It's one of our precision instruments into the into the runway there. We're not meeting the FAA requirements, but the FAA has been kind of changing those, so I'm working with the engineer on how to fix that. We purchased baffles. It's an issue with flying in. I think I might have showed this at one of our meetings. If not, I'll bring it to the next one. But our PAPIs are a visual light system that guide you into the runway, and if you fly at large angles off them, you can't have any obstructions in the way. And we happen to have obstructions on Round Island. We cleared part of those, obviously, a long time ago from a visual approach, but this is on another visual approach. So obviously we're not going to go do any additional removals or anything like that on Round Island. We have no interest in that. You can install a baffle. It's just a metal baffle that blocks the light from going over that way, and that solves the problem. We're having an issue dialing that baffle in the box to block the light in. So at this point, the issue is really with the engineer trying to figure out what needs to be done to block the light. The manufacturer says it can be done, so we're going through that process right now. But we failed a couple flight checks with the FAA, and those are costly. But at this point, the last failed one I've obviously put onto the engineer because there's an issue with the supplier and the engineer there. So overall, very happy with the engineer and the project, but this is kind of just one of those small nagging issues hanging behind. Hopefully we'll have it wrapped up here in the next month.
Any questions or comments for Mike on the 0422 runway? Hearing none, we'll move on to our action items, which is item number 8. And item 8A is the election of chairman, so I will turn that over to Mike to run that portion of the meeting.
Let me pull that up here. Annually, we're required to elect a chairman and vice chair of the commission. Since I've been here, Chairman Moran has been part of the group. I guess we can go down the commission and see if there's a nomination and support. If he's willing to accept that again.
If nominated, I will accept.
And Mr. Moran, and I guess if we want to make that into a vote. Who made the motion? Who wants to make the motion? I'll make the motion. All right, Mr. Fulham. All ayes?
Aye. Well, thank you. I guess I will take over the election for the vice chairman. Yeah. Are there any nominations for the office of vice chairman? Our current vice chairman is Mr. Rathel. Mr. Mans.
I will support Mr. Rathel retaining the position of vice chairman.
Absence?
In his absence.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll close nominations for the office of vice chair, and if somebody'd like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Fulbaum, support by Mr. Tenova to elect Mr. Rathel as vice chair. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to item number 8B, or C, which is the budget support. All of us have discussed in both a study session and here tonight our current budget. We have a number of items of capital improvements that need to be addressed. There are 5 items in our list that we can choose to either tackle them all under this budget or spread them out starting this year and either next year or the year after defer some of these. So I'd like to find out what's the pleasure of the board on the budget as specifically as it relates to these capital improvement projects.
I'd like to support all of them.
So you would be in favor of the budget that was presented tonight that has all of these included in the budget?
I believe they're all necessary, so I support all of them.
Nova, Mr. Mans, any comments?
Yeah, I think you hit it, Mike. It's just on the tennis center roof, just make sure that, budget the amount, but obviously if it is less than, then maybe we hold off for, 1920, but let's see what we can find out when they peel it back and get a better idea. But budget the full amount.
Mr. Filarski, any comments? With that, we have a resolution in front of us that reads the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby adopts a resolution of support for the proposed Airfield Commerce Park budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. Motion by Mr. Mans, supported by Mr. Tenova. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Mike, you got your budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Forward with that. Item number 9, our next item on the agenda is the subcommittee reports and the 1/18/18 meeting update.
I guess I'll take it. I don't see Mr. Rigg present. Just a brief update. We met on 1/18 with the advisory committee. We were finally able to get together. We talked about a couple issues going on in the airport. Obviously, the hot one is our 1735 discussion we had at our last meeting, talking to the committee a little bit about that. At this time, I mean, we gave it the same overview I gave to the commission at the previous meeting, the engineer's report and those items. At the time of the meeting, the committee's recommendation was to go to the state and continue requesting emergency funding for repairs on runway 1735 until long-term funding can be secured or a long-term plan can be secured for the runway. I think obviously the goal is their idea and goal is to rehab or facilitate the runway and get emergency funding until we're able to do that. They don't necessarily have a time frame in mind or anything like that, but just to keep continuing those repairs as necessary.
That was their recommendation to us.
Correct.
With that recommendation, we'll move on to item number 10, which is runway 1735 future use.
Put together one more brief presentation, Mr. Chair. At the previous meeting, the commission asked me, in talking about potential future uses for the Commerce Park, the one idea that was thrown out is if we were to offload that portion of property, either for development or an air park. The commission asked me to do a little bit of research into that, find a couple comparables in the area and see how they develop it. So I just put a brief presentation together talking about it. Proposed site, you can see I broke it down into 3 different segments there, different acreages. Now, obviously there's some give and take in those estimates. Like in section 3, obviously, my intention would never be to, if we were even going to consider offloading this land, to give up the tetrahedron there. I mean, that's a historical part of the airport, so we'd want to keep that. And I think there have to be a bigger buffer zone next to our taxiway Charlie that runs down the middle of the airport there, and then near the end where 422 comes off. I mean, we got to watch our safety zones and that. That's something an engineer would have to review. I would have to defer to them on. But obviously, without accounting for roads or anything else, there's a possibility for 230 half-acre lots in there. Just some of the benefits for future homeowners if we were to offload the property. If you were to make an air park, we have a well-equipped airport for aircraft and services on the field. You got water access with the canal there. We have infrastructure here on the island that could be tapped into. I mean, we have public utilities, roads, shopping, restaurant. We have all the amenities to attract a sale of that property if that's the route we want to take. We have close proximity to metro areas. Obviously, some of the benefits, we're going to have an increased revenue. There's property taxes for the township overall. If we were to be developed into an air park, I learned through some of my investigation that air parks or airports that offload some of their surplus land for an air park development charge an HOA-style fee that goes to the airport that's recurring. Obviously, there'd be fuel sales added on the airport and an added overall value to the airport. I mean, it's going to be an attraction and something that's noticed. Comparable number 1, and overall through my studies, it seems a lot of these air parks are hit or miss. I guess I'll say overall, a lot of them are sold by the lot. So there isn't a developer coming in and building these houses and trying to sell it. It's normally an association or a group. They designate a 10-acre plot of land next to or on the airport and say, per lot, it's for sale for $100,000, $80,000, whatever the price is, and then you develop it yourself. There are some businesses that will develop the facilities for you and get a little more involved, but those tend to be in more traveled areas, and I would say higher end clientele. Wyoming, Jackson Hole, down in Florida. I mean, they have a lot of private ones where those guys can fly, 80-90% of the year down there, whereas we're kind of a more limited season. So this air park, actually, Sandy's Air Park in Ohio near us, is owned by Sporties, which is a very large company that supplies flight equipment, headphones, accessories for pilots. They have 12 sites that are open for development. They have through-the-fence operations with easements to the runway. So that means they can taxi right out of your garage from your house out onto the airport. It's a gated community. You can see the first picture there. These were developed with a private builder. Again, they sold the lots, and then the developers built that stuff. Now, a developer could buy the lot, or an individual owner could do that and develop it themselves. But they were selling it per house. But the occupancy was very low. They have 11 lots total, and only 2 have sold. So that's obviously not doing as well as I'd like to see. But I have a diagram there of what their air park looks like.
Mike, any idea how long these have been for sale?
I don't recall the date on that. I believe it's been, I want to say around 6 or 8 years. I don't recall. I'd have to get back to you on an exact date. So you can see the 2 there. This one does a little bit better. This is up in Fenton, which, I mean, they have, I would say, a little more of a clientele that have wealth up there. They charge a $40 monthly association fee. They, again, sell it by the lot. You buy the lot, you build your own place. So they don't have a special developer that's doing houses and hangars. It's kind of find your own developer. I think they have guidelines in their association of, square footages and hangars and certain aspects of the aesthetics. The lot prices go from anywhere from the 20s to mid-$100,000 just for the lot. And they've gotten 41 out of their 84 lots are sold. And looking at this, obviously, in my opinion, if we're interested in offloading for revenue a portion of our property, I'd want to make sure we're going to get the whole portion, the whole dollar amount valued. If we try to do this ourselves and sell it lot by lot and have a failure like Sandy's and we've got 2 houses built out there, that's obviously going to be a waste of our precious resources. So you could find a developer for the whole property and possibly offer that to them for development of an air park or other houses, or we could designate a zone, something like that I think would maybe be a happy medium, or you can just unload it to a normal development and do strictly houses. But we'll go through, there's a couple of the houses with the hangars you can see in the Plains Inn and Fenton building. That's a beautiful air park. It's a very nice setup. They do have some luxurious homes. And overall, I mean, they're 50% sold right now, and I apologize, I don't have the dates when those started. I can get those to you. Comparable number 3 is Torchport Air Park near Torch Lake up north here in Michigan. They've got 68 home sites on the property, 15 commercial sites. They're very close to the downtown shopping and entertainment. It was privately owned, and actually the entire air park right now, I noticed while I was looking, is for sale for roughly $1 million. The owners have retired. All lots have sold and are sold and have homes on them. They only have 3 vacant lots left there. I believe I have a second picture. No, I don't. So that's a little more successful one. I mean, they're on the water. I guess that's a similar comp to us. But again, they're selling it lot by lot, so you're going to share some risks there if you do that. Again, what I already stated, most air parks in the Midwest that we research are sold by the lot, and then the owner has to build their own structures. There's some dedicated air park developers. Again, Florida, Texas, Wyoming is where we're seeing those. Normally high rent districts and places that can fly year round. And again, I just listed a couple resources we looked at. You can do some research yourself if you want me to share these. They're just websites where you can look for air park stuff for sale properties, houses that are actually listed, things like that. So I guess my point overall is, it seems like trying to develop an air park over there is a little riskier. I mean, we could try to sell it to a developer as for strictly an air park. I don't know if we're going to find a developer like that. My bet is not. You might be able to designate a portion of the property if we're interested in doing that to an air park. It seems like the best bet would be just to offload it to a developer if that's, again, what we're interested in. But we're going to have a one-time revenue shot there. So, I mean, it's got to be, we need to make sure that would be the best choice for the airport. But I just want to report that back. The commission requested a little more information and research on it.
Any questions for Mike?
How many lots would fit down the canal on the opposite side of the far
See
side
there?
of the runway?
If we pull this back up, and I might be able to extrapolate something for you. So there's 18 acres running down in section 1 of that canal. So, I mean, if you do half-acre lots, you're looking at 36.
Half an acre sufficient. I mean, the house would be probably pretty wide if we're talking about putting a
Yep.
container on the side of it.
Correct. You could do bigger. I mean, I just based it on half-acre. Seems to be the standard around here and talking to assessing and things like that for a larger lot.
The soil would be okay. Is that
Yep, the soil, as far as I know, would be, I mean, we'd have to do an environmental, probably phase 1 and 2 study on the property, and we can use some of our brownfield or there's other grants to do that. From my knowledge, obviously we have the runway. That's a pretty big issue. Somebody's going to have to remove that pavement that's failing there. I mean, that's a large cost. You might be able to put a road on top of it, but as we've learned from putting runways over runways, it's not the best idea sometimes. So, I mean, there's going to be a cost there for removing that. In addition to the runway, the Navy runways used to be a lot wider. And if you may have noticed on 1735, I mean, we don't have great drainage off the west side of that runway. That's due to having pavement underneath the grass there. So it's wider than it seems. I mean, that runway is listed as 75 feet. Its actual is around 150. So there's some drainage issues there that would have to get addressed too. But as far as I know, the soil to the west of the runway is clean other than that. I'm not aware of any development of buildings on that soil or anything else that the Navy did. Most of it was in the center. The blimp hangar and all that was in the center of the airport, and everything else was down by the Seaplane Base and in the woods on the east side.
Anything else? Any other questions? Okay.
job.
Yeah, thanks,
you.
Mike. Appreciate the information. And I don't know if we want to act on the recommendation of the advisory board, but I think it was pretty much our sort of recommendation to do the same thing, was to continue to see if we could get funding through the state of Michigan to at least keep funding some of these repairs on a yearly basis. And Mike, when do you do that? What's the sort of timeline of talking to them and then finding out whether they're going to do anything or not?
Normally at our annual meeting where we go through our 5-year capital improvement plan, which we already had, and I reported back to the commission, I think after that meeting, that verbally it was indicated that this year could be potentially our last year for that funding. Now, the committee requested something in writing from the state. That's something, I mean, I can have that discussion with them outside of that and request, I can write to them and officially request additional funding beyond this year and see where it goes. I mean, the committee didn't discuss long-term goals and plans. That was pretty much the response from the committee, was continue until we can, their goal was to rehab that runway and request the funding until that can be done. Now, I mean, from my comments, the only comment I had to them was, I mean, to come up with another $300,000 for a runway with a lot of capital improvement projects on our plate, I think that's going to take a long time. But it doesn't hurt to ask.
So you will have that conversation and then
Correct.
let us know how that goes, and whether you do it verbally or in writing, at least initially, I'll leave that up to you, or that's, that you handle that the best you feel fit for that.
Yep, I do actually have a meeting. I have a conference tomorrow in Lansing it's the MAAE conference, but MDOT Aeronautics, Michigan Airport Association conference, and MDOT Aeronautics attends that as well as the FAA, so I'm sure I can have some discussions there in my meetings tomorrow too.
Any other questions for Mike? No? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 11, which is the chairman's report. I would just like to welcome our newest member, Daryl Filarski, to the commission. Thank you for volunteering to sit on the board. And Daryl, if you want to take a minute and sort of tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your little background, and so we get to know a little bit about you.
Sure. Just real briefly, I grew up on Roseville. I actually went to Gabriel Richard High School, graduated in '87, live over on the south end. And, I'm a commercial credit manager with TD Bank. How's it? So, anyway, yeah, Daryl Filarski. I'm a commercial credit manager with TD Bank. Grew up on the island, and look forward to serving with you.
Well, welcome aboard, and look forward to working with you for the next couple years, I guess, or however long you want to stay on the commission and volunteer your time and your services. So, thank you. Item number 12 is public comment. There's no one in the public today, so is there any other old business, new business from any of the commission members?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may make one comment.
Sure.
He was unable to make it tonight, but I just wanted to wish Commissioner Rathel good luck next month. For those not aware, he's been battling a disease, and a group of his doctors and people with the similar disease are going to be climbing to Mount Everest Base Camp as an expedition. They have a wonderful group put together, and he's been training very hard. I know he's been traveling out west a lot and climbing some large mountains and getting altitude training. So I just wanted to wish him the best of luck on the trip. If we don't see him before then, but he'll be gone for most of March. I know it's a several-week trek up to that site. So wish him good health and safe travels.
And we'll expect him at our April meeting, you think?
Correct.
Yeah, good luck. And I know I talked to John about that a little bit, and sounds exciting, and hopefully he'll make it to where he wants to go and get back safe and sound, and we'll see him in April. So, any other comments, questions? New business, old business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fallbaum, supported by Mr.
Support.
Tenova to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries.